This is America on the Road, named Best Radio Show by the International Automotive Media Conference, and now in its 31st year on the air. Thanks for being with us as we bring you the latest automotive information from around the world. I'm Jack Nerad. With me is co-host Chris Teague. Chris, it is wonderful to be with you as we're in the midst of fall now, right?
Yeah, wonderful to be with you too. And I know this is going to sound like a foreign concept to you, but I'm already planning out my winter vehicle testing. So wow. Fall tends to come and go here in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, it got really cold here all of a sudden. I came back from a trip to Texas and bang, I'm in cooler weather. Well, let's talk about the news. If you're going car shopping, you might be in for a giant shock in the next week or two. We'll give you the grim news about that coming up. Is your car spying on you? I think we asked this question about a month or so ago, and now a new proposed federal regulation suggests that the problem is real, maybe realer than ever. There might be another motive behind the new rule, though, and we'll talk about that. You know how these politicians are. We'll also talk about which vehicle brands get the most loyalty from their owners. This according to a new J.D. Power study on the subject. Chris, are you worried at all about your car spying on you?
I'm not worried about it, but I also realize that it is absolutely spying on me.
Yeah. I'm a little more worried about my phone spying on me than my car, but
yes.
Who knows? America on the Road is brought to you by drivingtoday.com, emlancy.com, the publisher of my latest book, Dance in the Dark, and, of course, Mercury Insurance. If you're looking to save some money, you should switch to Mercury for your auto and home insurance. Californians save an average of $670 with Mercury, so imagine how much you could save. Get a quote today at drivingtoday.com/auto insurance. That's drivingtoday.com/auto-insurance. Well, as you longtime listeners of the show know, Chris lives at one end of the country. I live at the other. Each week we get together to talk about cars, the car industry, how you can save some money on your car. And Chris, you have a really interesting vehicle to road test this week. Tell us what it is.
I did, and I actually had some nice weather to test it too. It's the 2024 Ford Mustang EcoBoost Premium Convertible, and I can't wait to tell you all about it.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to hear about it. My test car this week came as I was driving this vehicle around Dallas, Texas over the past weekend. It's the Genesis GV80 3.5T all-wheel drive Prestige, a car better than I deserve. That's for certain. This week we have a terrific guest. His name is Danny Shapiro. He's the vice president of automotive at Nvidia. Fascinating guy with fascinating stuff to talk about, this whole connected car thing, car as software, all of that. We'll talk with him about that. So a ton of show for you this week. Stay with us, and we'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad back with you. And we're so happy you're with us. Thanks so much for joining us on America on the Road. We do appreciate it. If you like America on the Road, please pass it along. We'd love you to do that. We also would like to tell you that we do a video version of the show. It's available on YouTube, on Rumble. So check that out. Subscribe to that if you like. It would be terrific for us. We would appreciate that. And let's talk about the news. The news is not all that great for car buyers, right, Chris? I mean, consumers are facing a big disconnect between what they think they're going to pay for a car and what car prices are. You're a car shopper, kind of extraordinaire. You're doing it all the time. But according to, this is a study from Edmunds, a survey from Edmunds says that nearly 50% of car shoppers hope to spend $35,000 or less for a new vehicle. And that's way out of line with what the average transaction price is, which is close to $50,000. It's $47,000 and change. There are a lot of people who want to make a new vehicle purchase for 20 grand or less, and that's just, it doesn't happen at all. I mean, we see this every week, Chris, but your reaction to all this?
Yeah, you know, it's beyond the fact that cars cost more, the average transaction price is higher. This has to be frustrating for buyers because, you know, we've been being told for what 3 years now that prices will eventually come back down. The pandemic messed everything up, but now it's going to be better. And so it's still not. And I'll also just point out the number of sub $20,000 cars. I mean, Mitsubishi's discontinuing the Mirage. And so you're kind of left with very few choices there. And they're not the vehicles that most people want to buy. So it's kind of an interesting situation.
Yeah, another whammy to that is interest rates. I mean, you're looking at car loan interest rates between 6 and 11%, something like that. A lot of people are just going, "What do I do about this?" Some people are taking a second job so they can buy a new car. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Um, the likelihood of this changing anytime soon is not great, is it?
No, and people ask us, should I wait till the end of the year? Should I wait till this and that? I mean, I think at this point, it's kind of a crapshoot what you're going to get because nobody's been right so far.
Yeah. Well, I think the industry has to address this because this is a problem for a lot of people. And I think part of the thing is we don't need all this stuff on our cars that they're seeming to be equipped with. I mean, it's nice to have electronic driving aids and all that, but I think a lot of times just a basic car. I was saying to my wife, if we could buy a brand new version of her 2000 Chevy Tahoe, I'd probably prefer that to the current Chevy Tahoe.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more safety equipment and a little bit better fuel economy, but give me the the old stuff back. But unfortunately, that's not the direction the automakers are taking, and in fact, they're going very rapidly in the other direction. So, that's also driving up the cost. But as we talked about, I think it was last week or the week before, a lot of these features are frustrating to people. So they think they want all this gear, and they get it, and then it ends up being a kind of a downer because it's so complicated. So. I don't know. I hope there ends up being some sort of balance here.
Yeah. Well, and some of it is mandated by the government too. We're seeing more and more safety equipment being mandated, and maybe even more going forward. So that doesn't help either. Here's a question, and this is a distinct government mandate. This is the U.S. Commerce Department proposing a regulation that would ban Chinese software and hardware in vehicles used on American roads. The rationale for this is there are national security concerns about this hardware and software. I'm concerned about that. It's kind of spooky to think that your car, and even though you don't have a car built in China, you could well have Chinese software and hardware in your car. Even an American brand car could have that. This is designed, I think, the backstory is maybe to prevent Chinese cars and trucks from coming into the American market without a giant tariff, although a giant tariff is also proposed. I mean, there's a lot to talk about here, isn't there?
Yeah, they're coming at this from two angles, right? You've got the national security perspective and then the economic perspective. But it's interesting. It's an interesting situation for a couple of American automakers, right? Because Ford builds the Lincoln, I think it's the Nautilus in China, and GM builds the Buick Envision in China. And the general line of thinking is that they'll have to relocate production of those vehicles if they intend to keep selling them here. But there are some concerns, and I do agree with them, beyond just the fact that the Chinese government or these companies could end up having this data, location data, and all sorts of other things. It opens the door to hacking and malicious actors elsewhere too. So, there has to be some sort of solution here. I don't know if an all-out ban is the right way, though.
Yeah, I don't know how to go about that either. I mean, the proposed rules would take in effect starting in the 2027 model year for software. That's not too far away. I mean, those vehicles are, kind of baked and ready to go. 2030 for hardware. Again, that seems a ways off, but it's not a ways off in terms of the auto industry and the lead times that they have. I mean, as you mentioned, there are just a few Chinese built vehicles in the United States, but there's a lot of buzz in the car industry about China, certainly, and fear that the Chinese, once they come in, will have a giant red wave, I guess, of vehicles that might overtake the industry. Kind of scary in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that BYD, one of the big Chinese automakers, building a factory in Mexico, and they may start selling in Canada. So they're gonna be all around us, even if we don't end up having them here. So I I don't know which direction I prefer that we go. I think some of those vehicles are compelling, but if they can't get around these challenges, then maybe it's better that they stay out.
Yeah, we shall see. Well, brand loyalty. How do you? I'm not sure. You are a fan of several brands, I think, Chris, but you also, change cars. Like I change shirts or something like that. But brand loyalty is a big deal to the car companies. I think it's a big deal to individuals too. I mean, a lot of us are fans of a particular brand or two. Certainly as a Corvette guy, I'm a Chevy guy through and through, and have been for a long, long time. I mean, our family had Chevys when I think the first car I remember was a 51 Chevy that we had. But brand loyalty is a big thing, and J.D. Power is tracking that. What they have found is now that we're kind of in normalcy in terms of ability to build cars and bring inventories up to level, that loyalty is kind of remaining true to form the way it was prior to the pandemic. And a lot of car companies are benefiting from this, and others aren't. I think maybe the logical brands for loyalty are benefiting, and we've seen brands like Toyota and Honda, for example, do very well in loyalty. I mean, what's your overall take on this?
Yeah, that is an interesting result from the study because, you mentioned it earlier, but I always think of those sort of generational dedication to brands as being an older type thing. My family was all about Fords growing up, and now my grandmother owns a Honda. So, things change, but automakers do, as you say, benefit greatly from this, and you can see it in their incentives for leases and things like that. A lot of them offer, significant discounts for returning customers. So it is, like I said, it's interesting to hear that result because I thought it would be the opposite.
Yeah, let me run through some of the highest ranking brands here. Porsche is number one among car owners among the premium brands. Mercedes-Benz trailing in second place, so that's not too bad. I mean, and loyalty rates of about nearly 60% for Porsche owners, so 60% repurchase a Porsche. Lexus has the same kind of loyalty among premium brand SUV customers, with BMW second in that sphere. Toyota is highest among mass market brands. Of course, a brand like Toyota and Honda really benefit because they have such a broad product range that you could replace a Corolla with something like a Highlander or something like that, completely different, but still within the brand. So that's strong. Honda is the highest among mass market brands in SUV owners, which was a little bit surprising to me. Subaru was number two. That doesn't surprise me at all. And then Ford is ranked highest among the truck owners. So a lot of loyalty there, with Toyota second among truck owners. Thoughts?
Yeah, I would have assumed Subaru would have been the number one there. I mean, maybe because I'm in New England, but, every second or third car on the road here is a Subaru. So I would assume that. But yeah, I can see how a full vehicle product line would be more appealing. You can stay in the family and sort of grow up with the brand. So yeah, really neat study.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, when we come back, we will have some interesting vehicles to test, including a Ford Mustang. I can't wait to hear your evaluation of the Ford Mustang convertible, and I was driving the Genesis GV80, a vehicle better than I deserved for certain. So stay with us for that, and we'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road. Jack Nerad back with you, and it is road test time. Road test time for vehicles that we think you'll be pretty much interested in. I mean, I saw a Mustang the other day, and I kind of scratched my head and went, wow, I haven't seen a Mustang in a long time, a brand new Mustang. And here you are driving one this week. So tell us about it, Chris.
Yeah, it's my first Mustang in, gosh, several years now. But this is all new. It's an all new car for 2024. They call it the S650 generation Mustang. You can get it in a fastback, which is just the hardtop coupe, or a convertible, which is what I tested. And Ford also offers two different powertrains: a four-cylinder, a turbocharged four-cylinder engine, and a V8. Before I go too far, Jack, have you driven the newest Mustang? And when was the last time you got behind the wheel?
I think I have. I might have been on the launch or, one of the early drive events for this vehicle. And I think I drove both the EcoBoost and I guess it's still a V8 powered version, if I remember correctly. And this is a while ago, maybe 6-8 months ago. But in the hills above Los Angeles, it was a blast.
Yeah, I will agree with it being a blast to drive. So Ford did away with the V6 engine quite a few years ago and replaced it with a 2.3-liter turbocharged four-cylinder engine, which is the one that powered my vehicle. It has 315 horsepower, 350 pound-feet of torque, and it sends that output to the rear wheels through a 10-speed automatic transmission, which is what I had. You can get a 6-speed manual in the four-cylinder vehicle, and Ford also offers the Mustang GT, which is a 5.0-liter V8 with 480 horsepower and 410 pound-feet of torque, so a significant upgrade there. But before I go too far, the pricing on this vehicle, pretty reasonable for a sports car or a sport e-car, Jack. The base price is $32,000, right around $32,000. That's for the hard top with the four-cylinder. You can go up to the convertible, which is $43,000, and then my as tested price was around $48,000 after some options, including one that has the heated seats and everything. What do you think of the pricing and the value that for what you're getting out of this car?
I think there's a ton of value in Mustang, and that's always been its calling card, right? I mean, right from the beginning, right from the New York World's Fair in 1964, whenever I believe it was introduced. And it has remained true to that. And amazingly, the styling has remained pretty true to that, too. I mean, you'll occasionally see a very early Mustang on the road, and you go, the new one looks kind of like that. And I still think the value is very strong.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, we used to say that about the Chevy Corvette, but now it's over $100,000 in some trims. So hopefully Ford sticks with it. But we're talking about this four-cylinder engine, Jack. We chatted briefly about it before we started recording. 315 horsepower, 350 pound-feet of torque. Those are stout numbers for a four-cylinder engine. This is not a terribly large and heavy vehicle either. So, you get quite a good romp out of it when you put your foot down. Ford claims a 5.5-second 0 to 60 time, and my butt in the seat dyno feel here tells me that it's probably about right. It feels just a little bit slower than my GR Corolla, which is rated at 5 seconds. So we'll just say that. The 10-speed automatic here, it is fine, but I will tell you that like Ford's 10-speed in its trucks and everything else, it searches for gears a little bit, especially at lower speeds, trying to conserve fuel economy. So it's searching to go up in gears and get you where you want to go. But, otherwise, especially under heavy throttle, it's very responsive and it works well. My only real problem with the performance in this vehicle is the sound. And this is what I brought up to you before we got on the air. Right. It's obnoxious and it's loud. For a four-cylinder, it just doesn't hit me in the right way. What do you remember about the sound of this car, and what do you think about it?
I think the sound didn't offend me, but it didn't excite me either, right? I mean, it was one of those things where, I like the V8 burble, right? I mean, that's kind of what you feel about this thing. And you're never going to get that from a turbocharged four-cylinder. It's just going to be, unless they pipe in a different kind of sound.
Yeah. I think a better setting for me would be to have a quieter normal mode and then maybe a valve that you could open up in sport mode and then make some noise. But maybe that's just me. Inside, this vehicle comes standard with cloth upholstery. Mine had an option that came with leather and heated seats. You get 4 seats in this vehicle, Jack, but I will tell you that the back seats, even for my 7-year-old daughter, just in a booster seat, they're not the most comfortable, and the person in the front seat's going to be shoved into the dash if they're, anywhere above, I would say 5.5 feet taller. So other than that, the front seats are very spacious. They're nicely padded. They're very wide. You have plenty of foot room. You can get a nice low seating position, which is what I prefer in sports cars. And visibility in that position for me is just okay. The car's belt line is pretty high. And it can feel a little bit like a cave, and the convertible, especially because when you have the top up, it is very dark. Other than that, I think the interior is nice enough for a sports car. And I like the way that Ford is kind of stuck with the retro look with the dials and the gauges and things. Technology, you get a 12.4-inch digital gauge cluster. It's configurable. You can put retro gauges and things in there. 13.2-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And my vehicle had an optional 12-speed Bang & Olufsen stereo, which sounded fantastic. So, Jack, the price I think is right on this. The performance is perfectly fine, especially for a convertible. 4-cylinder is just fine here. So other than the sound, I think I would be on board with this car.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think the shame of it is there just doesn't seem to be that much of a market for a 2-door sports coupes like this, or convertibles for that matter. And the convertible is probably going to be in rental car service more than any
Yep.
place else. I mean, if you're renting a car in Hawaii or Florida, I mean, that's what you're probably going to get if you want a convertible. I like it a lot. It's just kind of an anomaly these days.
I agree.
Yeah, which is a shame, but time does pass. Well, I was driving a vehicle that I think is classier than I am by a large margin. Occasionally, Chris, I think we get into vehicles and we're just kind of wowed by how good they look both inside and out. It doesn't happen all that often, but it has happened with me with Genesis brand vehicles several times. And certainly the renewed Genesis GV80 for 2025 is one of those vehicles. I had a chance to drive it along with a large part of my family down in Texas over the past weekend. As we were shuttling around to football games and this and that. My middle daughter actually got engaged over that weekend, so it was very, very cool. But there's a lot to like about this vehicle, and everybody who got into this vehicle was kind of wowed by the interior. I had the Prestige trim, which is the up-level trim, but this is an interior that would feel at home, I think, in a Rolls Royce. It's just incredibly well done, opulent, quilted, perforated Napa leather interior. Just gorgeous. The tailoring just very, very cool. Has a giant display screen inside too that also wows people. So an interesting vehicle from so many points of view, and yet it's not incredibly expensive even in this form. In the form that I tested, it was about $80,000, which is, I think a pretty good price actually for a mid-sized luxury brand vehicle, and especially a top-of-the-line luxury brand vehicle with 375 horsepower from a twin-turbo V6. You're kind of nodding along here. Give us your thoughts about this thing.
I am nodding along. One of the things I love about Genesis is that they've figured out how to pack in a ton of stuff in the right way, not just for like superfluous junk, and keep the price fairly reasonable for what you're getting there. And I completely agree about the interior. We've talked about this before. Audi figured out a long time ago that it could differentiate itself with really nice interiors. And I think Hyundai, I say that, but Genesis is taking that same approach, and it's working out well.
Yeah, I mean, you can buy one of these vehicles for less than $60,000. The standard trim is $57,700 is its MSRP. And it includes this giant 27-inch infotainment display. It has wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, a ton of driver assistance systems. It has all-wheel drive. And then as you climb the ladder, this is with a turbocharged four-cylinder engine. As you climb the ladder to the 3.5T, which is with the larger 3.5-liter V6 twin turbocharged V6, is also all-wheel drive. The base model is the advanced. It's about $74,000. It is the one vehicle in the lineup that offers 3 rows of seating. It's kind of interesting to me that there's only one that offers 3 rows of seating, with the more powerful engine and significantly more expensive. I would have thought a 3-row family oriented around $60,000 or $65,000, something like that, would play pretty well, but I'm not the product planner. And then we have this top of the line Prestige that has, as I mentioned, Napa leather seats. They're heated and ventilated, both front and rear. It has a heated console armrest, rear door sunshades, second row vanity mirrors. I mean, this is kind of over the top in terms of luxury equipment, and it's just a vehicle I liked a lot. I haven't talked much about the driving, but it drives just fine. More comfort oriented, I think, than performance oriented, but it certainly feels good. So I think they've done a very, very nice job with this vehicle, and I just hard to praise it more than I am praising it. I just think this is one of these vehicles where $80,000 is a lot for a vehicle, but I think there's a ton of value here versus the competition.
Yeah, I think the people that are springing that amount of money for this vehicle are feeling like they got their money's worth. I really like the twin turbocharged V6. I think it's fantastic. And as you mentioned, the driving experience sometimes takes the back seat to the other experience, but it is perfectly fine. It's quick. It's got a comfortable ride. It's quiet inside. So, yeah, if I could afford one, I probably would have shopped one a long time ago.
Yeah, one of the things too, it doesn't bowl you over. I mean, the infotainment system is pretty easy to use. It does have that weird thing where it has a dial shifter and then another dial that runs the info. That's the biggest nit I can pick on this thing because that is irritating, and I kept grabbing the wrong dial when I wanted to do one thing or another. But other than that, I mean, there's just everything to like about this vehicle. I liked it a lot. I think it's a heck of a value. So interesting two vehicles that we have this time around, right? The Mustang, excellent value, maybe a bit of an anachronism these days. And then the Genesis GV80, a really good luxury brand vehicle, luxury brand SUV.
Yeah, I agree. Now you got me wanting to go drive a Genesis again.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And that isn't too far in the future. When we come back, we will have a great special guest. His name is Danny Shapiro. He's Vice President of Automotive at Nvidia. And fascinating stuff to talk about with connected cars and the car software and all of that. So stay with us for that. And we'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road. Jackie Red back with you. We have a terrific guest, really interesting guest, maybe a little afield from what we typically do on America on the Road, but very apropos to what we're doing here in Southern California, and certainly apropos to the industry. With us is Danny Shapiro. He is a vice president of automotive for Nvidia. Chip maker, basically, I guess, among other things.
We do a lot of things, not just chips. We started out that way, but you're right. It's a lot more. We can
well, describe your company a little bit, because many of our listeners are probably not familiar with you.
Well, many people probably know us as a gaming company. That's how we got started over 30 years ago. We made graphics processors so people could play video games, basically, on their PCs. From that, though, it expanded into professional graphics, so anybody doing 3D for their work. It could be visual effects artists at DreamWorks or Pixar, ILM, or car designers, right?
Yeah,
engineers using CAD systems, computer-aided design, to medical imaging. So it sort of grew. Then we started bringing our graphics products into the car. So we started to see more and more screens appearing, consumer electronics, iPhones, etc., tablets. The car was lagging, so Nvidia was an early partner to many automakers, bringing that technology into the vehicle, touch screens in a Tesla, and Audis, and BMWs, Hondas, Mercedes, right? So that business really grew. Our company really, though, is an accelerated computing company. And what that means is, how do we make computers go faster? So graphics is one aspect of that, but now it's all about artificial intelligence. So Nvidia is really pioneering work in AI, bringing that into the vehicle for sensor processing. And what that means is the cameras or the radar or the LiDAR on the car generates a lot of information that needs to be processed to ensure that the car can drive safely. And so that's what we're doing with companies like Volvo.
Give me a little sense of your background, how you got to this. Are you kind of an electronics guy versus an automotive guy?
So my background is electrical engineering and computer science. So I was originally a programmer. I did a lot of work in computer graphics. And so I did some animation work, I did engineering work, some design, and was working at tech companies in Silicon Valley for quite some time, and joined Nvidia 15 years ago. And we soon after started an automotive group to really take the technology and bring it inside the vehicle. And so developing hardware and software, a lot of software to provide those graphical user interfaces, but now more importantly, safety.
I'd really love to talk about that. But let's take a step back a little bit, because really infotainment has become such an important part of every vehicle. It's something that, as a car reviewer, I'm talking about maybe before I'm talking about the powertrain. It's something that we all interact with multiple times when we're in the vehicle. It can be both a satisfier and a big dissatisfier, depending on how you look at it. So walk us through kind of the evolution that you've seen of graphics and computing power in vehicles.
Right, well, I think if you consider any kind of computer you've ever had, whether it's your laptop or a home PC or now your mobile phone, every year new ones come out and they have greater and greater performance.
Right.
And they start doing well and then they start to slow down because the software gets more and more and more complex. Mm-hmm. And so there's really this insatiable demand for computing power because there's more data and more code. So what we've been doing is really trying to change the model of how automakers used to operate. And by that I mean, in the past you'd say, okay, 5 years from now, we're gonna design a system that will do this. So let's figure out what's the cheapest chip we can put in there in 5 years to be able to keep our costs down. And so they start working on this, and 5 years from now, this thing comes out and it's already out of date.
Right.
And so instead,
and it can't be updated. And
of course, everything is all fixed function. You had maybe 100 little chips doing all different things in that car. Mm-hmm. So instead, our approach has been, and really Tesla was one of the first to pioneer this, is you put a very high performance computer inside the vehicle, and all those little things that used to exist are now software apps. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's the windshield wipers or the locks or the windows or other types of things, your navigation, the music, etc., it all runs on that central computer. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what we've been pioneering, bringing a high performance central computer to the car, which makes development a lot easier. It reduces the overall cost, it reduces the overall weight, reduces the overall energy consumption because you just have one computer instead of all these tiny.
And which is kind of, essentially what we're seeing in the EX90 that I've test driven today. It kind of tell us how it expresses itself in the vehicle.
The Volvo core computer is going to handle all these kinds of functions, and that's based on our Nvidia drive. And if you're over at the landscape area, part of the exhibit, you'll see it. It's about maybe 10-inch square. It's like 2 inches tall. It's liquid cooled, so it's part of the whole battery cooling because we need to make it automotive grade, right? If you leave your cell phone in the car on a hot day, it'll overheat and it won't work.
Bad things will happen.
We need to make sure that anything we do in the car can operate in the freezing cold of winter, in the hot summer in the desert. It has to be able to handle the shock and vibration in the car. So there's a whole new manufacturing process that we go through for these automotive products that are different than what you would put in your laptop or your PC. But that core computer then runs all different kinds of software. And the key thing now is that your car will get software updates just like your phone. So your car is going to get better and better and better over time as new software developments come out.
Right. We've had some issues with that in the past. I think most of those issues are over, right? But I think there's been some frustration with people where the update didn't take or whatever, and then they're left in the lurch.
I think that's been a big challenge for the auto industry, right? The tech industry has been doing this a long time, right? We're computer companies. We're not auto companies, right? We don't have the same expertise and the ability to build vehicles like a Volvo does. But at the same time, they're going up a learning curve in terms of producing software that's robust and even managing that over-the-air upgrade. I know one of my early cars, supposedly it was software updatable. I had to drive it to the dealer so they could install new software there instead of getting it over the air. But you're right, I think it's gotten a lot better in general.
And get even more specific about the advantages of having one central source of computing power within the vehicle rather than a number of them around the vehicle.
Well, I think from a development standpoint, if you talk to Volvo, they're going to appreciate the fact that it's much more streamlined having that single integration as opposed to all these different parts from all these different vendors running all different types of software, and then it sort of becomes an accountability issue. If something needs to be fixed, well, whose bug is it in the system?
Right.
So that's one aspect. Updating it is much easier. Rather than trying to update all these separate little components, you update a single computer. Testing, a lot easier. You test that whole single thing. And so that's one of the things we, of course, do is a huge amount of testing. We use simulation. So we simulate cameras or radar or LiDAR and can test whether the system is able to detect the person walking across the street, or read the signs or the lanes or whatever it is that the software needs to be able to do.
Right, right. Do you deal with the human-machine interface, how the driver or even the passenger would interact with, say, an infotainment system or control system, or not? Is that beyond what you typically do?
Generally what we do is we do the core hardware. We do what's called the operating system. That's kind of the software that sits below the user interface, whether it's in the graphics or the sensor processing. That's all algorithms that we develop, but also work very closely with automakers. But that top level of the application, the user interface, how big the buttons are, whether you swipe right or swipe left or whatever it may be.
How deep the menus are seems to be an issue too,
so that is really usually under the purview of the automaker. They have their own UX team, and they'll develop that look and feel.
I just want to know who to blame.
Now, in some cases, right, if you have Google running in the car or you have CarPlay, again, that interface would be handled through Google or Apple. But again, that integration is going to be done by each car maker.
Right. Well, to a lot of people, Volvo equals safety and safety equals Volvo. And it strikes me that what you're doing is really important to Volvo taking that safety to the next level. Talk about that a little bit.
I think now there's a direct correlation between the amount of compute that you have in the car and the level of safety. Because what we're doing is we're taking cameras that are running at 30 frames a second, the standard video camera. We have to analyze all the pixels in every frame of video and determine, is there a person, in front of the car? Is there another vehicle? Is there a bike? Is the light green or red? Where's the lane marking? So in 1/30th of a second, we have to analyze that video and understand it, and then make a decision. And we don't just have one camera. There might be 8 cameras around the car, so it's a massive.
And it has to coordinate. That has to be coordinated too. It can't just be one.
That's
one-off kind of stuff.
So there's a massive amount of computation that has to happen every single second, and that's just for the cameras. And there's also radar data. And now in the EX90, you have LiDAR, which is a laser scanner. So think about all this information that has to be processed in a flash. And so you need a very powerful computer. So the Nvidia Drive computer that's in there is over 250 TOPS. So this is a new metric.
I don't even know
it
what that
stands for trillions of operations per second. So it is a huge amount of computation. So much more than your standard laptop. And again, it's designed for the sensor processing using artificial intelligence to be able to understand the environment and make safe driving decisions, turn left, turn right, accelerate brake.
Walk us through how artificial intelligence figures into this, because I guess maybe it's kind of new to me, certainly. So talk about
I think most people now are familiar with ChatGPT, right? And so it's this amazing system. You can type something and it will respond as if it's a human. But it's not like it was programmed. It was trained by feeding it data, feeding it language. So it basically learned how to represent human language, and then the knowledge from the internet or wherever the source was that was used to train the model. So this is known as deep learning. So instead of writing code, a program to do something, saying if this happens, then do that. Instead, we use data to train it, and that way it can understand and react. So not just using text, we can use that with images. And so this is something we've trained system. Let's just take the example of a stop sign. Older systems use something called computer vision, which was you still had the camera, you'd still look at all the pixels in the frame, but they would run through a program that was looking for specific things. Oh, a red octagon, white letters, the letter S with curves, a square looking T. So it would then run that code and determine whether that was a stop sign
or not.
It required a massive amount of code, and it was slow. And so instead, deep learning let us, instead of writing a program, using the data to create the program. And by that I mean we train the system by giving it tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of pictures of stop signs. We might take them from all different angles, in the morning, at noon, at night, in dark, sometimes in the bad weather, with a bush covering part of it. And so it learns how to recognize a stop sign based on all this data instead of somebody writing code.
Kind of like how we learn to recognize
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
You show somebody something, and a child may not recognize it the first time, but you show them enough of them, and from different angles, they learn to recognize it.
Yeah.
So they build that vocabulary.
Yeah, I mean, even before they can read, they can probably grasp what a stop sign is.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of at the core level what deep learning is, using data to train these vision systems, but you can train it on any kinds of data. You can train it on how to recognize weather patterns, for climate prediction. You can train it on DNA sequencing, for healthcare applications. You can train it on how molecules bond for drug discovery. So this is why artificial intelligence is really taking off, because it's going to be applied to every single industry.
Well, it seems like we're maybe just scratching the surface on what it can do for us. There is the holy grail of the totally autonomous car, the car that will drive itself, right? A couple questions on that. One is, let's talk about AI and how that can help us get there. And then I want to talk about the amount of computing power that's necessary to get that to kind of work.
No, you're absolutely right. And so these driver assistance systems that are going in the car are fundamentally the same architecture as what's going into a robotaxi. Zoox is operating in San Francisco and the Bay Area, and they're developing these bidirectional robotaxis, no steering wheel, no pedals. They're using Nvidia technology inside because they have LiDAR sensors and radar cameras on all four corners of the vehicle, surround. And so they have redundancy built in, but there's no human backup. Right. So it has to be spot on. So there's a massive amount of compute that goes in. Many of our processors are being used. And again, there's redundant systems, so that if one were to go down, the vehicle still has a fail operational mode.
Yeah. Pretty critical. What are we going to see in the next 5 years out of this? I mean, you're probably developing at least 5 years out, maybe farther than that. Talk about that.
It's super exciting. Again, we're seeing this first wave of now these, the industry is calling it a software-defined vehicle, right? So it's a centralized computer. It has a set of core functionality now, but each software update adds new features, new capabilities, greater safety, maybe a highway pilot. The next software update could be a city pilot, and just all kinds of other software for convenience. We're also seeing AI inside the cockpit, so more of a concierge, where not that you have to then talk to Siri out in the cloud or to Google in the cloud, but the AI assistant knows your vehicle, it knows you, and you can have a direct dialogue about the car inside the car, so that's all running locally. And then if you need to go get information about a location for navigation, or the weather, or the time for a movie, whatever, it's going to go out to the cloud.
Are you building in a huge amount of quote unquote extra computing power just based on the fact that these will be upgraded and probably require that?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's the whole core thing. Instead of that previous model, which was what's the minimum spec we can put in, it's out of date. Now it's kind of flipped, and it's like, what is the most we can put in the car today? What is the best performance? And now it's into hundreds, if not our next generation, 1,000 tops into the car. And when that car is released, it might not use it all, but it's designed so that it can be upgraded, have a long life ahead of it, instead of, in the past, you bought the car and it was the best it was ever going to be the day you drove it off the lot.
Right.
Now it's at its most basic level the day you drive it home, and it will just get better and better and better over time.
What do you think is the most exciting thing we're going to see over the course of the next 5 to 10 years out of this area and out of automotive?
So I've been in a lot of self-driving vehicles. If you've never been in one, it is truly remarkable.
It is.
It is. And I think there's a lot of people who are scared of it. And I think it's natural to be scared of something you might not understand or you've never experienced. But I see them all the time in San Francisco, where I live. And people get out of them and they're like taking selfies with the car. I mean, they just had this magical.
And they're still alive. It's really amazing.
Still alive. I mean, the reality is they tend to be very boring rides, right? I mean, that's what you want. You want to get in the car. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to pay attention. The car drives you based on the app where you want to go. You get out, and you're done. So it's really quite a transformational experience when you're in there and you realize that this provides mobility for people who might not otherwise have mobility. And it's going to reduce congestion, I believe. It's going to be more energy efficient. It's going to reduce the amount of parking lots. That's another big thing, right? You have cars that sit around so much. These kinds of things are going to really reduce the amount of.
How soon are we going to go beyond robotaxi to personal transportation that is autonomous, or is that not even a model we should be looking at?
I still think, I mean, different companies have different models, but I still think it's a possibility. I mean, you know, the classic stat is that, you know, your personal car is only used 4% of the time, right? So in some cases, it might not make sense to invest that money into something that's not really utilized. So I think a lot of shared transport, but there's no reason why you can't see this kind of capability happening inside of personal vehicles. We're working with, I said, Volvo, we're working with Mercedes-Benz. The next generation Mercedes will be using Nvidia Drive as well, and so that's going to roll out throughout every flavor of Mercedes-Benz over time. Again, a centralized, high-performance computer, software updatable, to get higher and higher levels of automation as it's safe. We're not trying to rush anything out. We want to ensure that it's purely ready for market, and so we're doing, like I said, a lot of simulation and testing both in the data center, where it's very safe, and then we put it on the roads for testing with professional drivers, and then once it's ready and approved and certified, it goes out to the public.
Yeah, it goes out to the public. What should I have asked you that I haven't asked you about this subject?
Well, I think the key thing is kind of what makes a car company successful in this new era. Mm-hmm. And so how are the winners and losers going to be chosen? And so it really comes down to the rate of innovation that they can bring this technology to market. That rate of innovation is really a function of the three computers that they're going to use to develop it: the training in the data center, the testing and validation and simulation, and the performance in the vehicle. So it's not just about that computer that goes in the car, but it's the whole engineering life cycle that the software development goes through. So again, these are software-defined cars.
Right.
These car companies need to become software companies, most importantly, to be able to produce good software, great user interfaces, and achieve a high level of safety, and be able to quickly iterate and bring new features to market.
Yeah, I mean, PCs and phones are turned over pretty quickly. Like if you have a 3-year-old phone, you get a really old phone.
That's right.
Typically, right? A lot of people keep their cars a lot longer than that. The typical lease is just 3 years, and a lot of people are keeping their, I think the average car on the road is 11, 12 years old.
That's right.
Walk me through how you develop stuff that far out and has that kind of length.
That is a really good question. I think you have to recognize new technology is always going to be better than the previous generation technology. It's a fact. It should be, of course.
Right.
And so what we've done is we've really tried to create a very long life cycle product. So even as we bring out our current generation, it's called Drive Orin. The next generation is Drive Thor, right? These are named after, you know, superheroes from the comics.
Yes. Yeah.
The software is the same that runs on both, but as you bring out the new one, you're going to get greater capability. It's going to be able to process more sensors. It's going to process higher resolution sensors. So it's also going to be a function of that vehicle, right? The vehicle 5 years from now is going to have better cameras, better radar, better LiDAR. So those things kind of in lockstep. The capabilities are going to evolve over time, but the point is, the car companies that we work with develop one software stack, and they can continue to enhance that, and regardless of whether they're on Drive Orin or on Drive Thor, they can be using the same software base.
Got it. Well, Danny Shapiro, so much interesting stuff. It's just fascinating stuff. I wish we had a lot more time to talk about it, but thanks so much for sharing all this with us.
It's my pleasure. It's great to be with you.
We appreciate it. And stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad back with you for our final segment. I'm always nostalgic when we hit the final segment. I love talking with Chris about cars, and we love also getting your listener question. This is listener question time, and we love getting your listener questions and comments. So send those to editor@drivingtoday.com. That's editor@drivingtoday.com. And Chris, I have a question for you from Lance in Tyler, Texas. Lance says this, kind of apropos to what we were talking about earlier in the show. I'm starting to hear a lot of talk about cars from China coming to the U.S. and threatening the auto industry. Is that a real concern, or is it just political talk?
Well, I think it is a real concern, Jack. You know, beyond the national security and privacy concerns we talked about earlier, there's a real economic concern for automakers here, because these Chinese companies are so well subsidized by their government and they have very well developed supply chains and other things that help them, they can afford to sell these vehicles for, pennies on the dollar for what American automakers have to sell theirs for. And if they were able to bring those vehicles in, there's a real scenario that could arise where they're undercutting American companies and other automakers too, not just Americans, on pricing and kind of drives them out of business, or at least puts the squeeze on them.
Yeah, I think there's kind of quiet panic in the streets in places like Detroit and maybe Stuttgart and those kind of places where there is really a great deal of concern about what's going to happen. I think lower labor costs are one of the things that the Chinese certainly have going for them. And just as you mentioned, the economies of scale and the fact that there are a lot of government subsidies. So it is a real issue, isn't it?
It is. I have to admit, some of those Chinese EVs look pretty compelling, but I don't know how we can sell them here without causing ruffling a bunch of feathers.
Right. Well, they're already across the border in Mexico. We'll see whether they come here or not. It kind of wraps up our show for this week. Before we go, I'd like to mention my newest book, Dance in the Dark. It's a crime thriller inspired by true crime. And of course, that's a passion of mine. The book is available on both ebook and paperback form at Amazon, so look for that. If you like our show, please pass it on. Listen on this radio station each week. Let your friends know where you hear America on the Road, and please pass on a podcast. Where can you get it, Chris?
Absolutely. A quick Google search for America on the Road podcast will bring us to you on all the major platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the rest. Like us, download us, leave us a review. All those things help us out a whole lot, and then you can take us with you wherever you go. Absolutely.
Look for us on YouTube and on Rumble. You'll see what we look like. We'll go right into our homes, and we love to invite you there. So thanks for being with us. We do appreciate it. Thanks to our Sports Byline Network stations for carrying us. And most of all, thanks to you for listening to America on the Road. We do appreciate it. And join us again next time for another edition of America on the Road.